St. Ignatius also offers Rules of Discernment Part 2. He describes these as further rules that can provide a more accurate discernment of spirits. The rules aren't a different approach, they're just a further refinement. Ignatius says that these are suitable for the second week of the spiritual exercises. And as many of you probably know, during the second week, we reflect on the life and ministry of Jesus. But it's also during the second week that Ignatius offers some instructions for making good choices on important matters. So in this session, I'll reflect on how discernment of spirits might be employed in decision making and talk about some of the refinements that Ignatius offers. Discernment in decision making is important for Jesuits. We talk about that frequently, and it was important for St. Ignatius as well. In the spiritual exercise, in his instructions for making good choices, Ignatius says that there are 3 times when a good choice may be made. First, when God powerfully moves the soul. When God's action is so clear and so dramatic that the choice is clear and that the individual responds without hesitation. One would describe this as a powerful movement of the Holy Spirit. Not very common, certainly, but it can happen. A second time is when a person has a clear understanding of what choice to make after having discerned the spirits moving in his or her life. Someone who has had experience of consolation and desolation and has discerned those movements is in a position to make some good choices. And a third time for making choices is during a time of tranquility. The soul is not agitated by different spirits and can freely and peacefully make a good choice. Each of these cases refer to movements of the spirit in one's life and the ability to discern those movements. Somewhat surprisingly, St. Ignatius does not say much about discernment in the constitutions. The spiritual exercises and the constitutions are the 2 major works of St. Ignatius. The constitutions are a collection of directives that St. Ignatius wrote for Jesuits, and especially Jesuit superiors, for our life and work together. They cover topics like the course of study for men in training, or Jesuit community life, or province administration. They're a very helpful set of directives. And in those constitutions, Ignatius frequently talks about making good decisions that would provide honor and glory and service to God. But somewhat surprisingly, he does not mention discernment very often. And I think Ignatius takes it for granted that in order for people to make good decisions, they need to be able to discern the spirits moving in their lives. So let's talk about what discernment in decision-making might look like. Mark Thibodeau makes a helpful point in his book, Discernment of Spirits. He says that our focus should be discernment of spirits, not discernment of choices. And I find that a very helpful point. In most cases, it's not a matter of the good spirit directing us to option A and the evil spirit directing us to option B. If a woman is discerning a vocation and trying to decide between marriage and religious life, I don't think the evil spirit is pushing her toward one choice or the other. Hey, go get married. If she were considering a life of crime and debauchery, the evil spirit might have a dog in that race. But otherwise, the evil spirit is probably not too concerned about her vocation decision. However, the evil spirit might prompt her to experience fear or dread or guilt in the midst of the decision-making process, which of course is not very helpful at all. As I referred to earlier, as I was getting ready to leave Boston College, I had to make a decision on where to go next, or my provincial did. And I had received offers from both Rockhurst and Regis University. And the provincial asked me to pray about the options and to provide him my reflections to help him make a decision as to where to assign me. And that's typical Jesuit discernment process for new assignments. We like to say, I discern, the provincial discerns, and then the provincial decides. So we're both discerning, and then he's deciding. Well, in the midst of that discernment, the evil spirit kept reminding me of what a failure I had been at Boston College. That evil spirit is always very helpful. And I kept telling the evil spirit to be quiet, so I wouldn't be in desolation as I considered options for my next move. As we face important decisions, it's good to be aware of the spirits moving in our lives. We try to make decisions directed by the good spirit, free from the influence of the evil spirit. For example, a college student might be trying to decide whether to drop his chemistry course or not. And that's not an easy decision to make because it usually means there's been some failure, something gone wrong. He's put a lot of time and effort in that course, and now he's perhaps needs to make a change. Of course, there are many factors to consider. Is it a prerequisite? Can he take it next semester and so forth? But at the same time, he should attend to the spirits moving in his life. The evil spirit could work in lots of different ways. The student might feel like a failure, or might be resentful toward the professor, or might be fearful about the future. If those spirits are moving, he's not really in a good space to make a decision. Alternatively, the good spirit could be at work. The student is disappointed, but at peace, confident that things will work out, focused on the bigger picture. And that could be helpful as he's making a decision. In a communal discernment, a group has an important decision to make and tries to discern the movement of the spirits. Members of the group try to discern where the spirit is moving in their own lives. And ideally, members try to notice where the spirit is moving in the lives of other members of the group. In this particular example, we've got the evil spirit working on two of the people and the good spirit on another one. And that fourth person doesn't have any spirit right now. So discernment is trying to figure out all the movements of the spirit going on in the group. For example, a year ago, Father General appointed Tom Green as the new provincial of the Central and Southern Province. The appointment was preceded by a thorough process of generating names of potential candidates and identifying the needs of the province and gathering information. And then a dozen Jesuits from the province prayerfully considered all the information and then gathered together to discuss the needs of the province and the strengths and weaknesses of the various candidates. The Jesuits at that meeting tried to be aware of the spirits moving in their lives. They didn't want to be engaging in that process while feeling anger or distrust or discouragement. And they listened to other Jesuits speak to try to understand how good spirit might be moving in the lives of others. Eventually, 3 names emerged, and they were ranked, ordered with pros and cons, and submitted to Rome. And then over in Rome, they did a discernment process themselves, after which Father General appointed Tom Green as the new provincial. When a group has a decision to make, it's good to try to discern the movement of spirit within a group and among its members. And now let me speak a little bit about some of the refinements that Ignatius suggests in this second part of discernment of spirits. One of the refinements Ignatius speaks about is consolation without previous cause. So here the guy walking to work, and all of a sudden he experiences consolation. In this situation, one has a powerful experience of being close to God. One's heart is filled with peace and joy and a desire of serving God. And nothing has happened that might explain this experience of consolation. As Ignatius sees it, something usually prompts consolation. It might be an enjoyable lunch with a friend, or a hymn sung at church, or a walk through the park on a sunny day. Any one of those things can be occasions for drawing closer to God. And God is able to work through those things to give us reassurance and hope. And that's the usual way that consolation happens. The consoling experience is usually prompted by something. St. Ignatius says that if we experience consolation without a preceding experience or event, then that consolation must come directly from God. I suppose that one of the reasons that he mentions this is that on a few rare occasions, Ignatius himself experienced consolation like that. He came to appreciate those key experiences in his life and recognize their importance. Ignatius wanted others to be aware that such consolation could happen, even though it's probably pretty rare. Consolation without previous cause is also related to what Ignatius says about making good choices. One of the times that a good choice may be made is when God powerfully moves the soul. Ordinarily, Ignatius would not want us to make important life choices after a single experience of consolation. For example, I might feel consoled after a nice walk in the park, but I don't want to decide to become a Franciscan based on that one experience. But for Ignatius, consolation that comes directly from God could be the basis of a life-changing decision. It's interesting to note that Ignatius includes another refinement in this section that's related to this issue. Ignatius advises us to be careful about making resolutions after the time of consolation has passed. Maybe a woman makes a retreat and has a very consoling period of prayer, a powerful experience of God's presence in her life. And that's a great gift. And the next day, as the retreat is winding down, she might be tempted to make a resolution to give away all her savings to charity. Ignatius would say, oh, hold on, not so quick. She will want to be a little more careful in thinking this through, weighing the pros and the cons, discerning the spirits before making such a decision. I suppose retreat directors often need to tap the brakes a little as the retreat comes to an end so that their retreatants don't start making all sorts of resolutions that have not been too carefully discerned. A second refinement that St. Ignatius offers in his presentation of the discernment of spirits, he says that sometimes the evil spirit is disguised as the angel of light. And there's the evil spirit, and he's got a halo on, so he's going to try to fool us and think he's the good spirit. What seems to be a good, positive movement in our lives is actually moving us in the wrong direction. And you can see why St. Ignatius didn't provide this refinement in the first section. Yeah, people in the first week would be all confused by all of this. So it's only for those who are advanced in the spiritual life that they could be able to sort this out. So what's an example? Well, one example might be showing kindness to someone who needs to be confronted. Perhaps Margaret's oldest son is in his late 20s and is an alcoholic, and the addiction has become progressively worse, and the son loses his job and gets kicked out of his apartment. Margaret might be inclined to welcome him back to the family home, cover his expenses until he gets back on his feet. Kindness is good, but in this case, it's probably not helping the man with the addiction. And by this kindness, Margaret is avoiding having a difficult conversation that she needs to have with her son. Fixing up a room for her son and preparing his dinner might feel good to Margaret, but it's probably not the good spirit leading her in that way. Conversely, someone might feel compelled to be confrontative at every opportunity. I've met people like that. I still remember the story of John, a man from a different religious order who had recently moved into a Jesuit community. He was working at a Jesuit school, and there were no other members of his community nearby, so living with the Jesuits made sense. John wanted to fit in and make a good impression. Unfortunately, one night he inadvertently left an ice cream bowl in the television room. And the next morning, a harsh note appeared on the bulletin board. To whoever left their ice cream dish in the television room, please be advised that I am not your mother and I will not continue to clean up after you. John was not quite sure that this living with the Jesuits was going to work out. He eventually decided he could stay, but that was not a warm welcome. The note writer probably felt consoled that he had confronted this bad behavior so effectively. In fact, it seems that he was just being a jerk, and such confrontation was really not necessary and did more harm than good. So confrontation is not always the work of the good spirit. Sometimes we might start moving in a good direction and then veer off course. Madeline, a high school teacher, might be very generous at school, taking on extra responsibilities to help everything run smoothly. And when a colleague is out sick, she often volunteers to cover a class during her free period. Madeline serves on the faculty budget committee that everyone else tries to avoid. She also cleans off the counters in the faculty workroom. After a while, Madeline starts feeling resentful for all those people who don't reciprocate. She starts feeling sorry for herself for all the work she has to do. And she begins to experience burnout, losing enthusiasm for her job. Well, this is not going in a good direction. A cleverly disguised evil spirit seems to be at work. And Madeline might have realized this if she had been a little more discerning earlier on. Or finally, maybe Carlos decides to become a vegetarian with good concerns for his own health and the care of the environment. But before long, he begins to feel self-righteous about it and pretty judgmental toward other people. He too seems to be heading off in the wrong direction. So Ignatius offers a few other refinements in the Discernment of Spirits, part 2, but we've touched on the main ones. The basic point is the same. We are like boats sailing on the water. It's good to attend to what direction we're moving. If we're not paying much attention, the undercurrent of the evil spirit can be moving us along. And that spirit tends to make us discouraged or fearful. It draws us away from God and from other people and away from the life God has planned for us. And that movement can also make it difficult to make good decisions. On the other hand, if we set our sails properly, we can catch God's spirit blowing in our lives. And that movement will draw us closer to God, enable us to better love and serve, and to make good decisions.